it's just wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for coming out during this celebratory week, actually, or a couple of days, I should say, of September 24th and 25th, the National Historic Site at Central High have a program going on for 2 days here, and it's somewhat enlightening. Although this afternoon I did make the statement to the director that there are so many people here in Little Rock that have an opinion that you really don't have to bring other people in. You can just take the mic and just go into the audience. I mean, many of them talk for 10 minutes. So it gave them an opportunity to say some things, I guess. So anyway, it all worked out. So I'd like to tell you why I wrote this book now. I started this book in earnest in January of 2006. And I had in mind the upcoming 50th anniversary in September of 2007 to have the book ready and to be able to sell it and so forth. And this event might have been the impetus, but it was not the reason. Besides, I sort of missed the date by 2 years. But I learned a great lesson in this whole idea of writing. Of trying to get your thoughts down, and which is a real good reason why it has taken so long, because of really some of the painful things that you have to revisit. And as I say in the book, I didn't talk much about this experience until the late 1980s, and that was after our 30th anniversary. And I was so proud to, I came back, and when I left, I was proud. Let me put it that way. We had Lottie Shackelford as the mayor here in Little Rock. We had Bill Clinton, who was the governor of Arkansas, who invited us into the mansion, which was, you know, not something that I thought I would ever see inside at least 30 years prior. And the group of people who were putting on the 40th anniversary were just very genuine in trying to really do an excellent job. I think the only thing that I still laugh about is that I don't know whether it was a celebration or a commemoration. You know, I think that never really was decided on that 40th anniversary. But the 30th and the 40th I had participated in, and in the years that followed, Melba told her story in Warriors Don't Cry. Ernie Green talked about his experience in the Ernie Green story. Mrs. Huckabee, the assistant principal, told her story, which was made into a movie called Crisis at Little Rock. And back in the 1960s, Mrs. Bates had told her story in The Long Shadow of Little Rock. So I started making my way into high school classes and college classes after the 30th anniversary to tell my story. I had been asked many times by various educators to come in and talk to students or come be a keynote for some church event or one thing after another, and I always turned it down. I did that for 30 years. But after I left here, I had that inside me to say I need to make a change in some of that, which I did. And what I learned as I was speaking with the high school and college classrooms, the students who knew some of the other works just assumed that my story was also the other stories, and that my story had already been represented by others. Well, that was just not the case. Each of us has a story, no greater, no lesser than each other, just different. So this is one reason my story had not been told. I was the only one who could tell it. But why the long wait? And it's because this journey, back in time was deeply painful, and to revisit that time, to really find out what it all meant, how it shaped the life I have lived, took a great deal of courage I wasn't sure that I had. I'd been hearing all these years, 30 some odd years, how courageous we were, but I just didn't know whether I had that courage. And I had friends along the way who helped me to get at the story, the journey backwards, as it was over 50 years. All things, it was a singular and a lonely path, to be honest with you. And I really do respect writers. I don't know how they do it and make a living out of it. It's something else. But quite frankly, I just didn't want to go to that painful path. But I knew it was necessary because, as with all things that weigh on your psyche, there are things that we need to see in the light of day to really understand. As it was with the old woman, when asked about her writing, she said, how do I know what I think until I see what I say? This book is my understanding of my story, and it's out now, and I can see the light of the day. What I like to do is, and another thing, there's some of you in here know me, and I'm an honest and straightforward person, and a lot of times I would rather not speak about something or someone if I have to always concentrate on the half-empty part, the half-empty glass, or sensationalize a moment in time. With that said, I've learned to stay true to myself and still tell this story. And I really do feel good about it. I'm just happy that my mother is still here with us to witness it, and which meant a great deal to me. So I was really doing my best to get this out. I'm going to read from 3 different places in the book, a little bit from the prologue, another area about entering, well, really about the types of children that or students there at Central as I saw it, and then about the most horrific night of my life. Those are the 3 areas I'm going to speak to you or read to you about tonight, and then after that, I'm open for questions. Few people my age still have more than one good friend from high school. I'm grateful to have at least 8, and that's Ernie, Melba, Minnie Jean, Elizabeth, Gloria, Terry, Jefferson, and Thelma. In the public mind, we are one, the Little Rock 9. But we are, in essence, 9 distinct personalities with 9 different stories, and this book shares mine. It is as much a story about the dedication of family, perseverance, and sacrifice as it is about history. It is a salute to my parents, Carlotta and Juanita Walls, who stayed silently in the background and swallowed great risk and suffering. They were the ones who had ingrained in me the quiet confidence that Jim Crow be damned, I was not a second-class citizen. It was that confidence that told me I deserved the quality education the Supreme Court said I was due, the confidence that steadied my feet to defy the racists with my mere presence at school every day. My parents bequeathed to me the confidence of their fathers, both hardworking Black entrepreneurs in control of their own economic lives. My family may have seen unlikely candidates for involvement in the movement that would spark nationwide change. But then again, that is the point of the book, to show that determination, fortitude, and the ability to move the world aren't reserved for the special people. Sometimes I've thought about how much easier survival would have been if more people had taken a stand. As I saw it, the students at Central fell into different categories. The smallest group was the easiest to identify, those students who were determined to make our lives miserable, the tormentors, the black leather jacket boys, their female cohorts, and the other cowardly students who clung to their groups in their evil efforts to push us out. They were the ones who called us derisive names, spat on us, kicked, hit, pushed, and slammed us into lockers and down the stairs. Maybe it was their parents who helped to make up the segregationist crowds that clung to the wrong-headed belief that Central somehow belonged to them, and that the 9 of us were the interlopers causing trouble by having the audacity to keep showing up. The second group included those students who were clearly sympathetic, even if they did not outwardly show it or jump to our defense in times of trouble. You could tell by the kind eyes that on our worst days seemed to say, "I'm really sorry this is happening to you." Sometimes they offered us a shy smile in the hallways or in class, or slipped a quiet note of support to one of us undercover. The majority of the students at Central fell into the third group, those who kept silent. They wanted all the trouble to end. They did not torment us, but they didn't extend themselves to us in any way either, not even quietly. They did not want to be associated with one side or the other. They chose to remain neutral, as if remaining neutral in the face of evil were an acceptable and just choice. They turned away. They rendered us invisible. They are most likely the ones today who, when asked about the class of 1957, tried to reinvent history. Things at Central weren't as bad as the 9 of us have said they have recalled in recent years. The mobs weren't as big, they say, the bad guys and gals weren't as bad, and the atmosphere wasn't as tense. Well, of course, that is how they remember the Central journey these 50-plus years later. When I was suffering in those hallowed halls, they turned away. They did nothing. They said nothing. They chose not to see. There was another group, a small group for sure, but in my mind, the bravest of all. Those teachers and students who at times were openly kind, who seemed to look beyond skin color and see 9 students eager to learn, eager to be a part of a great academic institution. When I went to bed, when I made it to my bedroom the night of February 9th, 1960, it was raining mud. At least that's how it appeared to me when I heard heavy wind and rain slapping against the house. I looked up at the window and saw thick droplets of rain mixed with red dirt sliding down the window panes. It was about 9:30, my favorite time of the night. I savored those moments of solitude just before bedtime when I got to unwind, listen to the radio, and think. The house was quiet. Daddy hadn't come in yet from his nighttime job at Big Daddy's place. Luana and Tina, then 11 and 4, were asleep in their room a few steps up the hall, and Mother was in her and Daddy's room near the front door. I clicked on the clock radio resting on the nightstand. The AM dial was already tuned to one of my favorite stations, WLAC, which broadcast nightly from Nashville. It was one of a few white stations that brought the soulful sounds of black rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and jazz artists, the Platters, Little Richard, Fats Domino, and Etta James, to places that they had never been before, the homes and lives of my white peers throughout the nation. And it tickled me when I imagined that maybe some of my white classmates at Central were listening secretly too. I particularly enjoyed a program called Randy's Record Highlights, which aired shortly at 10 o'clock. As I changed into my pajamas, my mind felt at ease. I had made it to the home stretch at Central, I thought. For weeks, things had been calm, no protesters or major incidents, and graduation was less than 4 months away. I had finally stopped sulking after the rejection from Antioch and decided on a college. My decision-making process had been quite simple. I accepted the first school that wrote to me with good news after the big letdown, Michigan State. Michigan State wanted me right then, and I was eager to be wanted. After such disappointment, I had been in no mood to wait to hear from my second and third choices. By the time the acceptance letters came from Brandeis and the University of California, I had already settled on going to East Lansing, Michigan. I was even starting to get excited. I liked the idea of getting lost among the thousands of students on campus. I'd get to come and go as I pleased, and no one would even notice. Finally, I would have a normal life. Dances, concerts, football games, maybe even a boyfriend. I had missed out on so much at Central. I could hardly wait to end this chapter of my life and start anew. But for the moment, it was bedtime. I clicked off the light in my room, crawled into bed with my thoughts, and let Etta and Fats serenade me to sleep. No sooner had I closed my eyes, it seemed, that I was shaken by a thunderous boom. The house shook, and I could hear glass crashing to the floor in the front of the house. I sat up quickly with my hands gripping the sides of my bed as if to steady the room. For a moment, I felt frozen in place. My eyes, wide with fear, darted around the pitch-black room. What was that? Was I dreaming? The explosion had come from the front. Then, oh my God, my little sisters, mother. I had to find them, and I leaped out of the bed, and as soon as my bare feet landed on the cold floor, I took off running through my bedroom. My first stop was the den just outside my bedroom door. It was eerily dark and still. I turned toward the hall and ran up to the front of the house. I was halfway up the hall when I saw Luana and Tina standing in their nightgowns with Mother in her bedroom door at the other end of the hall. When I reached them, Mother and the girls looked dazed and bewildered, but unhurt. We stared at one another, too shaken to even speak. Little Tina's eyes moved quickly from Mother to me, searching our faces for clues. A haze of smoke floated through the darkness from the living room to the hallway where we stood. The smoke hurt my eyes, and an unfamiliar scent filled the air. It smelled as if something had blown up in the chemistry lab. Inside, I was trembling. I felt helpless and horrified, and I needed Daddy. He would tell me everything would be okay and make me feel safe. But he must have been working late. It was 11, and he hadn't yet made it home. I suddenly felt a painful sense of responsibility as though I needed to step up and somehow make the situation right. But I didn't know how. I could feel real panic rising in my throat. I had the odd thought that the stoic Carlotta, the one who always felt her hard work and smarts would make everything okay, who had believed that everything was possible if she stood firm and stayed strong, was now at a total loss. The sound of my mother's voice quelled my panic. She was calm and restrained, but I heard helplessness too. "Call your daddy," she said. With that, I'd like to stop at that point and open it up for questions, and then I'll have the opportunity to go over and sign some books. Yes.
All right, let me get the microphone to you, because we're recording this.
Thank you. I did not go to Central. I was at Hall High School.
Okay.
Graduated in 1959. We did have 2 or 3 black students at Hall in that graduating class. And I wanted to tell you how sorry I am that when I went there, I was one of the silent people whose own life was so frightening, both at home and at school, that I couldn't tell you what I wanted to say, which was, "You're welcome here. I would be your friend. You have a right to come here." And I think that you were all heroic. I admire your courage so much, imagining what you must have endured every day, going there and being treated as you were. You're heroes. You changed our world for the best, and I thank you.
Well, thank you for saying what you have to say. Thank you.
Questions? Steve, there's one in the back, and is there a microphone? Yeah, Horace has got one.
How did you make the decision to go to Central that year?
How did I make that decision? It was a process. I first read about the Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court decision in the Weekly Reader, and it was discussed in our classroom in that segregated environment. I had that idea that, and that was in May, I thought that come September that schools would be, all the schools be integrated. I mean, that was that naive thinking. Then when it did come around, which was 2 years later, actually 3 years later, the Blossom Plan was to build 2 new high schools and integrate Central. I passed Central every day going to Dunbar Junior Senior High, and Central was my neighborhood school, as we would look at it today. So it was a no-brainer for me for what I had been taught for those first 13 years of my life by my family, by that segregated school that I went to, Stevens Elementary School, and by those great teachers over at Dunbar, that once you have an opportunity to be a part of change, to better yourself, to get what is there for you, to take that opportunity. So in April of 1957, when this sheet of paper came around in my homeroom class, Mr. Roland Smith was my homeroom teacher. He read the bulletin, he got halfway down, and he said, anybody who lives, and he gave the street boundaries, and intend to go to Central in the fall, please sign this sheet of paper. So he started it over on the right-hand side of the room, and when it got around to me, I signed it. I elected to go to Central. I passed it on to the next person, didn't even tell my parents when I got home. So, but because of what I had been taught for so long. So it was not until that summer when they discovered that I had, or it was discussed that I'd be going to Central in the fall. So that's how I elected to go. Now, I've been hearing all kinds of stories about how we were selected, but I will tell you how I elected to go, okay?
Hey, before I do that, let me say a special introduction to another woman who Carlotta acknowledged and made history in Little Rock. Would you welcome the former mayor of Little Rock, Lottie Shackelford? There.
Oh. There you go, Lottie. That was great.
Now, we have a question. Here you go, Alex. Oh, you got it.
Hello.
Yes.
You sound good.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank you very much, not just for coming, but for writing the book and the courage it took, frankly, to write and to proclaim and to talk. And I really appreciate that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
A very natural question I have based on the previous question was what kept you going back? Like once you made that decision, once that the first day happened, the 25th, the 26th, 27th, like at some point you're coming home, you're processing this, your family's processing this, even each of you, both individually and as a group, the 9 of you are processing this. At some point, did you kind of come across that place of, I can't go back, I can't keep doing this. I'm proud, obviously, that you did.
Yeah.
But could you take us there? Like what kept you going back?
Well, a number of things. I was taught at home, I heard this rather often. My father told me that his responsibility was putting a roof over our heads and putting food on the table. My responsibility or job was to do well in school, make A's and B's. I could not bring C's, D's, and F's home, okay? So I'm supposed to go to school, and I loved school. I mean, I hadn't missed any times, unless it was a sick day, but I used to get those little achievement things that, you know, you had made it through the 6 weeks without missing a day in school. So it was something for me to do, that was a part of my life to do that. I got to a point, as things got bad each day, that it had really become a job. And I know we had been asked many times, you know, that did you have defensive teachings or whatever, as they did for the sit-in groups that came after us. We didn't have any formal training. It was on-the-job training. So it was a job, and I just considered going back every day because I was supposed to go back and to learn all that I could possibly be, learn as much as I possibly could, and also be supportive of the others that were around me. I mean, even though it was 9 of us, and all 9 of us really didn't know each other initially, we all became, you know, very close. So I think it was something about being supportive of the others as well, not wanting to give up. And again, it's about commitment. And when you commit to do something, then you see it through. And I think that's what we need to continue to teach our young people today. And I use my son as an example. He was on a some baseball team down in Atlanta, little kid, you know, first, second in grade. And the pitchers, you know, they just throw. And they can't get it across the plate all the time. And he seemed to get hit all the time. And, you know, my point is that he was to get out of the way if it was not crossing the plate. And one Saturday, he did not want to go. And he said he was sick, and I knew he was not sick, but he just didn't want to be hit again. And I just told him that he had to see this whole thing through. This is a commitment to his teammates. So you see it through. Now, once this season is over, if you don't ever want to play baseball again, that's fine with me. So that was the attitude I had through that time. And then there's that other piece that somebody might ask, and I might as well answer it now. Why did you go back in 1959-60? I needed that diploma to validate all that I had gone through in 1957-58. I needed it. I needed it. Carlotta needed it. Okay? And then the statement that you made about being a hero, I really feel that the real heroes and sheroes were really our parents, because to his question, going back every day, they are the ones who knew how important it was. They knew what risks they were taking by allowing their child to go back every day, not knowing whether they would come back in one piece or alive. And I saw my mother gray that year. So they are the real heroes and sheroes.
Let me also take a minute to introduce, as she says, one of her friends and one of her comrades, as she refers to in the book. Most of you in Little Rock know him, but our Clinton School students may have not had an opportunity to meet him, but he too walked up those steps with Carlotta. Would you welcome Ernie Green? Okay, further questions? Got a question right here. Let's see. I'll give you this one right here.
Hi. I hope I don't make anyone uncomfortable with this, but a number of years ago, probably as many as 20, stories started coming out about particularly Martin Luther King and how the FBI was running counterintelligence and saw the whole black effort to liberate as a threat to the country. And then some years later, it came out that Daisy Bates had an FBI file on her, that they had been trailing her, they had been watching her every move. In light of the bombing that occurred and other things that were going on at that time, did you have any idea then, did your parents or anyone else, maybe the magnitude of the threat, that it wasn't just isolated to, white racists in Little Rock. And afterwards, if you had any knowledge of that, did it give you any perspective of what actually you were doing and what was at stake?
Well, I learned over the years, you know, what was at stake as far as that goes. I knew the basics as far, but the FBI did have a dossier on each person. And I know that because when I applied for a job and in Denver, Colorado, and I'm sure all of us probably have one there, and we can probably get it from the, you know, the Freedoms Act, I think it is, Information Act. And I was about to get mine, and then I said, why do I, you know, I know what I went through. Why do I have to read garbage, is kind of what I thought, because of what I went through in getting this one particular job. I came home from work one day, and I was about to switch jobs. I had applied for a job at the Rocky Mountain Energy Company. I can't remember what it was called then. It's no longer there now, but it was a federal project. And I came home, and later that evening, my father said to my mother and I that a neighbor told us that the FBI was in the neighborhood. Now, this is 1963, 64, and had been, and I did not discuss all of this in the book, that they were asking questions. And this one particular neighbor told my father the type of questions they were asking. And then I got a phone call the next day from the FBI asking me to come down to the courthouse, and made an appointment for me to go in. So I couldn't understand what it was all about. And I hadn't really connected the job application to the fact that the FBI was in the neighborhood. It just reminded me of what I had gone through in 1960. So that was what was in my mind. So I get there, and they had this folder, and they started asking me various questions. They were trying to be nice and trying to make me comfortable. But every question they ask about my involvement in groups, committees at Michigan State that evidently were communists, and you probably have one too, Ernie. Groups that I had never, you know, they said they had pictures of me, you know, meeting in this place or that place, and those were the types of questions. And, you know, to my knowledge, no, I didn't know that that group was communist type or had any leanings in that direction. So all my answers were honest questions. So I believe all of this. Yes, they are there. Right. Well, and they call it socialism now, but you know, at that time, yes, communism was big. Right, right. So that you know, I went through this here in Little Rock, and then I'm in Colorado, and then this stuff comes back to me, you know, at that time. And that's a lot of the reasons why I never talked about this time in my life. I was really trying to put it behind me.
Question. Let's see. We have a question. Mr. Banks back there. Someone give him the microphone.
Hello, my name is Patrick Banks. I'm a student here at the Clinton School.
Great.
And I'd like to say thank you for coming tonight. I think most of us here have seen that horrific video of the first day of school for you guys. Mm-hmm. And I know you spoke a lot to the support from your friends and your family, but to my knowledge, I haven't heard a lot about the support that the 9 of you sort of showed to each other in a given school day, and I wondered if you could speak to that.
The support that we showed each other. Okay, first of all, I think it was only in one instance that two of the Little Rock Nine were in a class together. It was designed for us to be alone in each class. So we weren't supposed to have that. Our support came at lunchtime, and where we had the opportunity to have lunch together. And we did that. Then we had, we were supporting each other in the car going to school and in the car going back home. I think that pretty much sums it to the point of understanding what each person was going through. Sometimes discussion was made about what happened that day. Sometimes no one said anything. It was a pretty rough day. Initially we met in Mrs. Bates' house for a couple of months, and during that time we were supposed to, talk about what had happened and give names and all that sort of stuff. And you'll see how I felt about that in the book. So we did that. I stopped doing it. I didn't see any changes taking place. So I figured I'd use my energy some other place, like staying on top of my
David,
classes.
you've got a question back here, right there.
My name is Dewi. I'm from Indonesia. I'm a student at Clinton School. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so touched. How do you see what happened in 1957 and what happened today as the President Obama became the first African American president of the United States? How do you see these two events promote the integration between white and black race in the United States? And how do you see the future of the United States based on these two events? Thank you.
The fact that we do have an African-American president, and how do I see it? Well, in 1957, I didn't think that we would have a black president anytime soon. And, I was also naive there for a little while after I left from here and so forth, and I saw progress taking place, such as the Civil Rights Act in 1964, the Voters' Rights Act, the Housing Act in 1960. Well, that Housing Act was 1960 in Colorado before it became a national act. But I did see some progress, and then I was hopeful that we would see some huge changes, that we would be moving along in our country. And then all of a sudden it was just like pulling back, that horse that was getting away. And I then became very cynical, to the point that I still question whether that was going to happen in this country. I didn't think I'd live to see this day. I really didn't. And and didn't think I would live to see a woman president either in this country. And I'm glad to see that we had a woman running on the Democratic ticket, an African American running, and a Hispanic male running. So that's a lot of progress, and we have come a mighty long way just to have that piece. So I'm very pleased that we have the African American president. I'd be happy after this year that maybe we can stop saying African American president and just say President Obama. But we will say what we need to say as we go along.
Right.
So, but I'm happy about it. And but it is not over, if that's what you're wanting to know. It's not over. It's real obvious that we still have work to do.
Got a question? Yes, sir.
I just want to thank you for your speech. It was
You're
a very
welcome.
powerful speech. You're a very powerful lady. I have two questions. The second is kind of embedded in the first. I was wondering, do you ever see those people that were the tormentors then today, and if any of those have ever came to you and said, I'm sorry, and if there has been any restoration to take place?
Okay. Well, those tormentors, no, not really, other than one that I knew about, and he was on the Oprah Winfrey show with us. and he made his apology, and that was someone that I did know, but I didn't even consider him a tormentor. I thought it was unusual for him to be that. He was one of those, a part of the Chile incident, and I knew him because he was dating the girl 2 lockers down from me. So I would overhear their conversations all the time, and they really didn't have that in them, okay? And he did explain on the Oprah show that it was some peer pressure, and he was forced to do what he did. So that apology took place. I have not run into anyone directly that I've received that, okay? I have read some things, and that's fine. I got a lot of emails prior to the 50th anniversary, and they stated something much like yours, that, you know, they wished that they had done something differently than to be quiet about it, and they were sorry that things took place the way they did, and that, you know, they've tried to make changes in their life, and, you know, that's all you can ask for. You know, and I appreciated that. I met in this parking lot last summer a person who was at Central at the same time, and he told me his story about how he wanted to come to us at our table where we were eating lunch and to get us to sign his book, but he was afraid to do that. And his friend, and he was a nerd, you know, the more he talked about it, and he's a chemistry teacher down in Florida now, so it's kind of funny. He was a nerd then, and he's still a nerd. And you know, I can say that to him, and I talk to his wife on occasion. So anyway, you know, he didn't help and he didn't hurt. He was just there, okay?
Yes, sir, we got a question in the back right here.
Did you ever make any friends?
Did I make any friends? Yes, I made a few friends, those that I knew that, or they made the entree, okay? That they were strong enough, had some spine, basically, to be able to speak to me and talk to me in my classes. Now, that was in class. Now, if you're talking about being a friend, like you have today, probably talking to your friends on the telephone when you come home in the evening, or a friend that was helping you with your homework, no, I had none of that, okay? So I knew of some of the kids that I was in class with, you know, that we could discuss some things desk to desk, you know, or my lab partner. We were able to have those kind of exchanges, but that was the extent of it. See, I want you to understand, young man, that we went to that school knowing that we could not participate in any extracurricular activity. We could not be a part of the band or the track team, or work on the newspaper or the yearbook. We knew we couldn't do that. We could not even be a part of the student council. You couldn't run for any of those, okay? And I think Lottie has made the statement, has always registered with me, that she elected not to go to Central because she was becoming editor of the newspaper at Horace Mann. And you like to see that on your resume when you are applying for a college. So, you know, I feel she did the right thing for herself. So I didn't have that, no, that kind of friendship. My two best friends, one told me right off the bat, no, I didn't sign that sheet of paper. I'm going to Horace Mann. That was my best friend. And my second best friend, parents sent her to a private school. So that took care of that.
Got time for one more question.
Thank you. I'm on the faculty at University of Central Arkansas, and I want you to know that you're a hero on our campus. You're eloquent, and it's good to hear you. I do wonder, I was going to the University of Illinois about the time you were at Michigan State. I'm wondering what your experience was like at Michigan State, because on the Illinois campus, the experience of black students was kind of mixed. It wasn't always great. I just wonder how it was at Michigan State.
For me, generally speaking, you know, Michigan State was really at that time in the forefront of doing some good work regarding race relations and diversity and getting African American students to come to the university, or minorities, period. And I think, and you have to give credit to the president. He was a good leader, John Hanna, and I think it was on the Civil Rights Commission. I probably should have taken some different choices, made some different choices while I was at Michigan State. I did come across racism, because you're going to come across it anywhere you go. I had a couple of teachers that I knew I had some problems with. And you know, that's another story too. One in particular, this one teacher, I like telling this one, only because how it ended up. But I was in this class, I was taking golf, and that first day she made some comments about what we could and could not do, and you know, teaching us to swing and hitting the ball and so forth. And she said, and when the first person hits the ball, and gave some direction and where it would end up, you know, if they can do that, they can come up here and teach this class. Well, that was a challenge. And about 3 weeks later, I hit that ball just where she wanted it, and I recall her eyes cutting over at me, but she then went on, and I never got a chance to teach the class.